Are you ready to try love again? To have some more intimacy, companionship, a partner in your life? And maybe you've gone through a rough patch. Maybe you have experienced the loss of a partner. Maybe you've gone through a difficult breakup, divorce. And it doesn't matter if you were the dumper or the dumpee. You've lost the vision. You've lost the dream of what you wanted. Or maybe you want to get back into the saddle again because the clock is ticking. Maybe the biological clock because you still want to have a family. Or maybe it's the elder clock that says, you know what? I don't want to be alone anymore. Life would be so much easier if I had a partner. Well, today we're going to talk about what you need to do to tune up, to get ready. You may have that vision of happily ever after, and you already know that that's not really true, right? That a relationship is a work in progress. And it is actually the journey that makes it joyful, that makes it interesting. There is no happily ever after. But let's look at some of the three keys that are important for you to master if you are going to get ready to try love again. They are biology, biography, and being. Biology. You inhabit this body, and it has its own agenda. When it comes to relationships, it is wired, it is programmed to bond because human beings are social beings. That's why there's that longing to be involved with somebody else, because we feel safer and we do better when we are in relationships. Well, that is, if the relationship is good. We may not do so well if the relationship is not good. But generally, we do better as a species when we have community. And part of that is bonding. And the body has a whole bunch of chemistry that it uses to make sure that you bond. It has feel-good hormones, oxytocin, that really compel you, that make you desirous of a connection. When you meet a guy and you feel that surge of excitement, that's the body's chemistry. And here's the thing, the body doesn't really care whether you have intimacy. The body's really more interested, and Mother Nature, in reproduction. And so it puts all that wiring and chemistry in to make sure that you reproduce. And it doesn't go away. I mean, it certainly lessens as we get older, but it doesn't go away because as a social species, we still do better when we are in connection with other people. So then there's biology. Biography is our way, our experience, our life experience, both the most recent and past experiences. And those experiences teach us how to survive. Remember, the body also wants you to survive. And the whole thing of bonding is about survival. So you learn patterns of behavior to survive, to get the intimacy, to get the connections that you need to survive, or not have them if they are traumatizing. So let's go back to the body a minute. The body has two, and I'll get to being in a moment, but the body has two mechanisms, sort of like approach avoidance. One is the desire, And that's that chemistry that kicks in when you meet somebody that really excites you and you just feel awesome. It's just such an excitement that it's almost irresistible. And the sexual urges, they can be overpowering. And I have noticed that they actually get stronger the older you get. Well, unless you're a man and maybe they get less. I'm not really a biologist, but those urges, that desire, sometimes can get you into trouble because the body doesn't care whether you have sex with the right person or not. Nature is only interested in passing on the genes. Now, your mind and your system and your personality has a very, very different idea about that. But let's look at the other part, which is the avoidance of pain. The body does not like pain. Or shall I say, you don't like pain. The body signals pain to tell you to avoid certain things, to hi there, to take care of yourself. And pain is very unpleasant. So you think about the things that have happened to you, such as having a breakup, that's pretty painful, or losing a partner. Grief can go on for years, and that's really miserable. And bad choices where things don't work out, even if you're the one who walks away, you feel really bad. It's like, why did I fail again? Why is that not working? There's that loss of a dream, that you have this dream of happily ever after. We all have it. It's shown in Hollywood, and everybody lives happily ever after. They find the perfect love. And so you think, well, what's wrong with me? What's the matter with me? Now, some of us, if we've had a significant loss, we might shut our feelings down and get really good at that, of not feeling any sensations, not feeling that chemistry, just really holding ourselves together. Now, this is not the best solution because you also cut off all the good feelings as well when you shut your body's sensory awareness down. And sometimes we learn this very early in our lives. We learn this shutting down, and it really makes intimacy difficult when you are not open to your feelings. I happen to know this personally because I went through this for a number of years with my first husband. I had shut down my sensation, my body, when I was very young. And we had this relationship in which the intimacy was really limited. And he was stuck in the relationship because that's what he expected. And that's where we go back, we go to the biography. What was your experience? And there's both the current or the most recent experience. Did you have a loss? Did you get dumped? Did you dump somebody? Did you have a breakup? How do you feel after that? And that's pretty raw. And then there's the past, the early childhood patterns. And what I have experienced in the years I've worked with people around life challenges as a PhD psychosocial analyst and coach is that these early patterns are connected to our current losses, that they come up, and that the problems that we have or had in our relationships are a result of the early childhood experiences. Remember, I said that the body is interested, well, it has its own agenda. One of those agendas is to bond with other people because we survive better when we're in community. But the body also has other mechanisms for survival, like when there's a threat. And the body does not like to be threatened. So as a child, if we are treated certain ways, we learn patterns to protect ourselves. so that we don't get hurt, so that we get at least the basics that we need, but preferably love and attention. And sometimes we do it even if the attention is negative, just because we need to know that we exist, that we have some kind of substance. When it comes to how you operate in a relationship, you want to look to your early childhood experiences. How were your parents in a relationship? Did they love each other? Did they show affection? Was your father supportive, encouraging, kind, generous, loving to your mother? Was your mother able to receive love? So that's first. They model it, and children, like sponges, they absorb it, and that becomes what they expect. In addition, how did your parents interact with you? Was your father hypercritical? Was he difficult to please? Was he present? Did he abandon you? All these things have a huge impact on what you come to expect in a relationship and what you are comfortable with. If there was no intimacy in your house, in your family, you may have a hard time with intimacy. If you were abandoned, you may hold back and not want to become intimate for fear that you are going to lose that relationship if you open up. And then there's this whole thing about, were you treated as lovable for who you are, who you really are, or was love conditional? And if you learned that love was conditional on you being a pleaser or controlling things or being a performer or acting in a certain way, then you get cut off from who you really are. And it's okay. Most of us really have lost track of who we are at a very, very young age. And it actually takes work and practice and effort to get back to who you really are. And that's the kind of work I do in my programs, is I enable people like you who want intimacy, who want to connect, who want to feel their heart, how to open up to that, and how to deal with the body and the body's experience that says, oh no, this is dangerous. I don't want to open up. I'm too afraid. So I teach my clients how to overcome the fear, how to handle the fear and still move forward. Some of the patterns that show up are that you stay in a relationship because it's familiar. So I told you that in my case, my first husband stayed with me even though I was shut down emotionally. I was intellectually very interesting. I was very attractive. I was sexual, but I hung out in my head. He had a mother who was very shut down emotionally. And so that was his expectation. Although finally, at a certain point, he had enough and he left. He still, I'm sure, struggles with that, even though he is a Gestalt therapist. These patterns can last for a long time. So you stay in a relationship because it's familiar. And when you're in a relationship that's different, that maybe demands more of you, more intimacy, that might be really triggering. That might be very frightening. There might be ways in which you actually avoid that. So I had a client who was very good at avoiding intimacy by choosing men who were not available. Now, isn't that a perfect solution? If you have men who are not available, you never have to deal with your own intimacy. It's always their problem. It's always their fault. Another pattern is the pleaser. Even though I was shut down emotionally, I was a pleaser for many years, which was another reason why the relationship lasted a long time. I was always trying to find the way to keep harmony, to keep things safe, to keep things comfortable. But ultimately, marriages, relationships are about up and down. And when you jump in and try and smooth things over, you don't allow the things that need to show up, the emotions that need to show up and be addressed. Also, you don't allow your partner to grow. So you're always protecting them, they don't grow. And eventually, the relationship stagnates. Another pattern is that I also was very familiar with was reject the rejector. If you had a history as a child of being abandoned or rejected in any way, and if you don't like being rejected, you're not alone. Most human beings do not like to be rejected. It feels awful. But to avoid rejection by rejecting the rejector, when I was first starting out in my current relationship, with my current husband, I was hyper aware of any sign of being rejected. It was like really on my awareness radar. And whenever I had the slightest sense that I might be rejected, I would pull away. This is not a very helpful pattern for moving into a new relationship or developing a new relationship or deepening it, because you're out the door before it's even gotten started. And relationships are all about difficulties and adjustments and learning to grow through the challenges. There's no such thing as happily ever after. It's a work in progress. Now, another pattern that gets a lot of women in trouble is planning the marriage after the first date or after the first conversation. You're already seeing the wedding and hearing the wedding bells. You're putting the cart before the horse. You need to hold back on that. You need to be. So that is the third key, being, which I also call brilliance. It's stepping into your authentic self. Now, when you are your authentic self, when you are who you really are, and you can accept who you really are instead of trying to be somebody else, you come from a place of power. You come from a place of strength. And then you can just be and let the other person be, and you can decide, is this working or not? And you might want to hang around and see if things can change. I have found that over time, if I change myself or change my own attitude, my husband will change too. It's sort of interesting that way. Before I talked about familiar, I had, and why do we choose the wrong guys? I had a client who married a guy. They were married for 30 years, and then he left her after 30 years. And she was very distraught. She wanted so hard for this relationship to work. Why? Because her parents' relationship didn't work. Her mother committed suicide, and her father was very critical. So in comparison to what her parents went through, her marriage was pretty successful, but it wasn't enough. In a sense, she went into a controlling pattern, or a pleasing pattern, where she was taking care of her husband, making sure to keep everything harmonious, but not letting the growth happen. So sometimes relationships break up because people grow apart. Now, another client I had, she married the spitting image of her father. and her father was very critical. Why would you marry somebody who is critical of you? Well, because you're used to it, because you expect it. In fact, I have discovered that you can actually pull that out of the other person. When the person starts out, they may not be that critical, but because you expect and you react a certain way, you actually attract that response. It's like there's this dance that you learn with each other, and it holds you back. So I talked about the people pleaser and the controller, and frankly, from my experience, both of them are about controlling. They're about trying to hold things and keep them safe through your effort. They're about not letting the other person be who they are. And if they're not the right person, fine, but let them be who they are. Stop trying to fix them. The third pattern is the avoider. This is a person who doesn't even try. And that's probably not you, so we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about that, except that it might sometimes show up in being rebellious. That is, that you sabotage the relationship by being really obnoxious or horrible. Sometimes we do this because we want to prove to ourselves that we're really unworthy, or to test our partner to see if they really love us. This is not a really good pattern. It puts a lot of strain on a relationship. So watch for that. The other is the depressive. And sometimes we learn depressive behavior because we are too afraid. And so we hide and we get depressed. Depression is really about not allowing your feelings, holding it down. So that's one of the things that I really help people do, is to release the emotional energy that you've been tamping down for a long time, so that you can step up with your true authentic self, with your brilliance, with your self-confidence, with your strength and power. There's one more thing I want to mention. Men from Mars, women from Venus. There are differences. Men have different orientation, and there are little tricks and traps that can get you stuck, and they may get stuck with you. When, however, you act from that place of being and brilliance, they don't bother you so much. They trigger you because you still have old patterns that are holding you back, old patterns that undermine and sabotage your effort at having a relationship. If you are having a challenge getting back in the swing of things, if you need a tune-up on your childhood wounds and a tune-up on your losses, let's have an introductory conversation, a 15-minute conversation where you can find out how I work with people, how I can empower you to become more of who you truly are, so that you can step into a relationship with much more power. Back when and you can set up you can schedule that. There's a link over in the comment box. When I started my current marriage relationship, when I first started, I could see the patterns that I had, like that pattern of reject the rejector. I could see that my expectation of being abandoned, because I was first abandoned by my father, although not forever, and second, abandoned by my first husband for another woman. I saw that pattern and I realized that that was going to get in the way. I also saw the pattern of protecting my heart, not opening up to intimacy. Intimacy is scary because you open yourself up for pain and for wounds, but it also comes with a lot of gifts, Because it's only when you allow intimacy, it's only when you allow yourself to open up to full vulnerability and connection that you get the rewards of a relationship, that you really are able to experience that and grow. That's all I have for today. Thank you for joining. And until next time, be brilliant. Bye.